Hi everyone, my name is Zach, and in this video I show you how to solve common sculpting problems. With sculpting problems I mainly mean some errors in your geometry which can cause some problems while sculpting, but also if you want to join certain objects using a Boolean operation, which is pretty important if we want to create base meshes or just adding or removing objects to our sculpting. Alright, without further words, let's get started. Problem number 1, wrong scaling. In Blender we have this certain scale factor in object mode, and if I now scale my object, you can see that this factor is changing. And according to this factor, other things will be influenced as well, like modifiers and also how the sculpting behaves. And after scaling an object, it's important that we tell Blender this new scaling should be our new default scaling. This we can simply do by scaling this up, pressing Ctrl A, and apply the scale. And if I hit this button, you can see that these values will get back to 1, but the scale of the object will stay the same. So let's press Ctrl A, click on scale, and you can see this is set back to 1. But how does this affect the sculpting, for example? Let's undo this. And now I scale this up in the Z-axis, for example. Something like this. Now you can see we have a pretty high scale factor in the Z direction. And now I switch to edit mode. So inside edit mode, I scale this down so that it looks like a sphere again. But we still have this high scaling in the Z direction. So now let's enter sculpt mode. You already get a warning here that we have a non-uniform scaling. And now let's see how this behaves. So let's enable dynamic topology. Let's check the resolution. Let's increase this a bit. Now let's start sculpting here. And you can see, whoa, what's going on here? This is behaving super strange. As you can see that this is somehow stretched in the Z direction. And this is exactly because the scale is not uniform here. So let's undo this weird stuff. And if I now apply the scale, switch back to sculpt mode, you can see everything is back normal. So if your brush is behaving super strange, check the scaling and then in object mode, apply the scaling. In many cases, this helps to solve the problem. So before we go over to the next topic, here's one other little thing I want to show you in terms of scaling, because Blender has some strange behavior. If you want to Boolean something together and the size of the objects are very small, then this can also cause some troubles. So let's scale this way down, something like this here. And now let's duplicate this. Let's apply the scaling with Ctrl A, scale. And now I just want to Boolean these things together using the bool tool and the union option. So click on that. Although the objects are just fine, you can see that it somehow does not work to join those two things together using the union option. So, but if I scale this up here, apply the scaling and now do the same thing, you can see that this is working. And now we can sculpt on here. And yeah, this is also one thing I discovered which is important if you're working, for example, with real world scale and your object is very tiny, then this can also happen. Scale this up by 10 or by 100, for example, join the things together and then rescale it down to the original size. This helped me sometimes to fix my problems. Problem number 2, bad geometry. A common term which is used for bad geometry is non-manifold. And this basically means that we have unwanted faces or some strange things in our mesh which can cause some troubles for either sculpting or for Boolean operations, which we will use a lot for joining different parts to create our base mesh and just adding or removing objects. Alright, and now let's take a look what this bad geometry means exactly. Here, for example, we have two spheres lying above each other. That means a lot of faces lying above each other, and this can especially cause trouble if you, for example, want to quickly merge an object with this one here. So let's try this out. Let's use the bool tool, union, And now let's go to Sculpt mode, Control D for enabling dynamic topology. Now let's try to sculpt over here, and you can see something weird is happening here. And that's caused by this bad geometry. So this is one problem. Before I show you how to fix this, let's go to another. It's something like this, basically that more than two faces are connected with one edge. And especially in a case like this, you can see I have this loop cut here, but inside the mesh, this loop cut is closed. And this is a mesh you can't really unfold for UV unwrapping, for example. And also for sculpting, this can cause some trouble. So let's add some subdivisions using a subsurf modifier, apply this, and let's try to sculpt on this using dynamic topology. And you can see we will always have this strange looking edge here in the center. So the next thing is also bad, especially for Boolean stuff and so on, wrong normals. Every face has a normal direction. This basically means a front side, and every face has a back side. Here in the properties panel under mesh display, I have enabled the normals, and you can see that for most of the faces this is showing outwards. This is correct, but for some faces here it's showing inwards. That means these faces are flipped. This happens, for example, if you extrude something in the negative direction. In this case I flipped them manually. If I enable flat shading, you can see it also pretty good. These faces appear darker than the other ones. And an easy and quick way to fix this, also in general, this is important, just select everything, press Ctrl N, and this will be fixed. But I undo this quickly and show you another thing that can cause some problems, and these are holes inside your mesh. So if I switch to Sculpt mode, sculpt over this and try to smooth this, you can see I just make these holes further and further. And certainly we can go into edit mode. There are some tricks to quickly fill all the holes. But imagine you have a mesh with multiple million polygons, and you probably know if you then enter edit mode, this can be quite painful. So how can we fix all that? Well, in actual fact, I had multiple solutions for all the different problems, but luckily I find something which is like the magic make the geometry awesome button. And for this we need an add-on. We go to File, User Preferences, Add-ons. Let's search for Print. And here we find the 3D Print toolbox. This is already in Blender. You don't have to download this anywhere. Just enable this with a checkbox, save user settings, and then you can find it down here. And for 3D printing, these non-manifold meshes are really dangerous. That means a 3D printer can't print objects with this bad geometry, basically. And here is this very nice button, which is called Make Manifold. And now let's go through all of the problems here. I select this and click on Make Manifold, and voila, you can see all the faces are closed. Also here we have the flipped normals. Let's make this manifold, and you can see all the normals are back, and we don't have to enter edit mode. Let's go to this one here. You remember the face inside the mesh. Let's make this manifold, and let's check. You can see we now have a beautiful mesh again. So this one was just another example of the same thing I showed you here. In this case, this is a whole non-manifold thing, so when I click the button, this thing just disappears because this is just so bad. Now let's go to the first one. Here we had this duplicate faces, as you can see. And also here let's make this manifold, and you can see a lot of vertices and edges and faces were removed. And now everything is fine again. And if I add a new object here, go to Bool Tools and Union with dynamic topology enabled, you can see I now can merge these objects perfectly. So you can see with this 3D print toolbox, Make Manifold, this is really like a magic button which can solve most of your problems. Except this wrong scaling, this you have to do with the apply scale, which I showed you before. So now is the question, is there geometry which can't be fixed? Well, in general, with the solution I just showed you, most of the things you can fix easily. But certainly if you have a part on your mesh which is just distorted and destroyed and all these techniques won't help you, then there's one solution: cut it off. So for example, let's quickly add a plane, delete one edge here. So we have one edge left, and add a skin modifier and a subdivision surface modifier. And the skin modifier in actual fact is for creating base meshes. But this one has one little problem which I find pretty dangerous for sculpting, and this is something like this. If you do it somehow wrong here, extrude too many vertices out of one vertex and move them somehow wrongly, you can have something like this. And maybe your object is rather complex and you didn't realize that you have something like this and already applied all the modifiers, and in sculpt mode you already started to sculpting. And then at some point you realize that you have this bad thing with this hole, and this make manifold button in this case does not really help you. You can see we still have this intersecting faces here. So in this case I would recommend cut this thing off and add some new geometry here. For this you can, for example, use the bool tool, draw polybrush. Then we just draw some lines around this area, press enter. Then we have this geometry which we can move over here so that basically everything from the bad part is covered. Then we select this one, then with shift this one and press difference. So this thing was cut off. Or what you also can do, if this thing here is not that big, make it a little bit thinner. And maybe in edit mode shape this a bit more like the original geometry. Something like this. Then again select both and click on union. Now they are unified. Just to make sure that everything is right, click on this make manifold button. You can see two edges were deleted. And then inside sculpt mode you can just fix this by drawing over this, smoothing this out, and just try to fix this big problem. It's like working with real clay, cutting something off or putting some new geometry in there, some new clay, and smooth everything here. So this is a general solution. If you have some very bad parts, then you can cut them out or replace them with a complete new geometry part. Yeah. And in this way I also showed you how to add and remove geometry in general. So if you just want to add some parts to your mesh, use the Boolean operation. Another quick thing I want to show you here, which is also helpful from time to time, is to use the remesh modifier. And this is especially helpful if you have, for example, 3D scanned an object, and in many cases the object then has holes in it and this tiny geometry which is flying around somewhere in the space. And with the remesh modifier we can easily fix this. So I add this remesh modifier, set the mode to smooth, and increase the octree depth. You can see the holes will be closed. This is another way to close holes. And because of this button here, remove disconnected pieces, all the small pieces which are flying around here will be automatically removed. Then hit apply. If after this the resolution of your object is too high, you can add a decimate modifier and decimate the geometry, and you can see I just have a quarter of the original geometry right now, and the shape of the object looks nearly the same. The cool thing about the decimate modifier is that on flat areas it will remove some more faces, and on areas where we have some more details, there we will also have more faces, so we can still see all the details. Then hit apply, and it's always good to hit the make manifold button to make sure that not one overlapping face is in your mesh. Problem number 3, thin areas. The last thing I want to show you appears inside sculpting. So for example, if we are in sculpt mode, I use my standard sculptor brush, dynamic topology is enabled, and I have front faces only enabled. That means I only can sculpt on my front faces here. And let's imagine I do this, and then certainly the faces on the back side will stay the same. And if I move things up here, you can see, oh, this is not good. The front faces are now peeking through the back faces, and this is looking pretty ugly. And there's one easy way to fix this by using the inflate deflate brush, and with the inflate option we can go over this area, and this makes the whole area thick again, as you can see. After this, smooth this out. Also maybe reduce the resolution a bit with the clay stripes brush, sculpt over here to fix this bad errors. And then you can fix this thing here in general. To avoid this problem on thin areas is certainly to not use front faces only. But certainly then, if I sculpt on the front face, the back side will also be distorted. So if I increase the strength here, you can see that this is also distorted on the other side. But yeah, you can see that this still is pretty thin here. Then with the inflate deflate brush, I can fix that. Yeah, and these are the main problems which are happening while sculpting. And with the solutions I showed you in this video, you should fix most of them.